So if we go into here, sort of the next step that I want to do is start VDB-izing these things and sort of smoothing things out and combining the different pieces of geo together to make sort of the general shape of the character rather than like a bunch of separate little primitives and stuff. So the first thing that I'll do is I can either use my VDB, what's it called, the radial menu here, and press Shift G and then do VDB from polygons. Or if you don't have the radial menu, you can just press Tab and then do VDB from polygons. And that turns this geo into a VDB. And for anyone who doesn't know what a VDB is, it's sort of like a different way of describing geometry in 3D space than using polygons. And a good analogy, I think, is that VDBs are like 3D pixels. And so that they're kind of like the equivalent of like raster images, like Photoshop and things like that. While, polygons are, made up of vectors and things like that. So that's sort of more like something like Illustrator, which, uses sort of like the vector line approach, but that's not limited to pixels or whatever. And they both have their own, pluses and minuses. But I find that Houdini's VDB workflow is like pretty unique and is sort of the closest thing that it has to like built-in sculpting tools. And it's way different from sculpting, but it is sort of a good way to get like organic-y sculptish shapes, but through using, different sort of like procedural shapes that you can mesh together all kinds of different ways through these fancy VDD Boolean operations like VDB add, subtract, and intersection, which is super cool. And we're going to be getting into that more deeply in a second. So we can see the resolution of this VDB is pretty low. Like, these are each of the 3D pixels here, the voxels. And we can raise the resolution by, on this VDB from polygons node, saying, change the voxel size from 0.01 units to 0.05 units to make it lower, or 0.01 units maybe. And one problem we'll run into is that if we do that, then you'll see that we have this sort of faceting in the same place that we have the input polygons. And so the issue here is that the VDB is kind of like a higher res than the polygons are themselves. So we can do two things. One, we can go to the sphere that we have and we can increase the rows and columns to increase sort of like the resolution of that sphere. Or alternatively, we could drop a subdivide node right before it goes into the VDB, and that will sort of smooth it out even more. So yeah, that's cool. I think maybe a voxel size of like 0.02 for the scale that I'm working at is good for the moment, and maybe we'll change it later. We'll see. But yeah, so then obviously there's a big thing here that I'm missing. And real quick, I could also like take the VDB from polygons and just plug the whole thing into it. And then I get this nice sort of like eyeball mushed in with the head. But then I lose the color that I have on the eyes, and the eyes are actually already sort of a nice shape with like good topology for what we want for eyes. So I'll just sort of leave those be for now. And I will instead just VDB from polygons, these two base meshes. And then we're going to start adding in the arms and the legs and the hair and things like that afterwards. So now we have these two streams. One is, geometry. We can middle click on here and see that we have all these polygons. And then the left one, we have these VDBs, and we can middle click and see that it says we have one VDB. And the merge will give us this error just because there's a mismatch of things coming into the two streams, but it doesn't matter. What we could do is we could just say, okay, I'm already happy with this character, and just say convert VDB and plug that in after the VDB from polygons and change it from converting to a volume to converting to polygons. And now we have all polygons, and this character is sort of ready to go, but not really. Now, what I want to do next is create some geo to be the arms and the legs and the hair. And so the way I'm going to do that is through a VDB combine, or on my radial menu, if I press Shift G, I'll just go to VDB SDF union. I think if you type in union on here too, you just press like tab union, you'll get this VDB SDF union thing, which is already set to do the SDF union, versus if you do VDB combine, it's set to copy A to begin with, which again, I mentioned earlier is not super useful. So you're going to want to set it to SDF union anyway. So just do that, look for VDB SDF union. And then I'm going to use another new node to create the arms that I will add to this SDF. And that's going to be the paint SDF volume node, which comes with Houdini. So it's not one of my HDAs. And plug that into the right side. And you'll see that this is similar to the draw from curves node that we had. So if I now draw, I'm literally drawing a VDB on here. And you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse to change the size of this cursor, or you can change the radius on the properties of the node over here on the brush tab. So I can sort of like draw this curve like that. I think I need to lower the voxel size so I can see it if I draw it that small. And I need to lower the sample rate too, because it's sampling these points and there's not enough of them to make up the whole arm. So I'm going to lower the sample rate down to, yeah, like 0.01 or whatever. And I'll do the same thing over here. And then I'll draw some fingers coming off. And I'll do the same thing over here. So the paint SDF volume node is super, super fun and really great for like helping build these kind of characters. And I'll do the neck over here too. And I'll do these little hairs as well. It's kind of lagging, like I was showing before. If I switch from, again, this tab to the performance monitor, it should be a little bit faster. But what's also going to be even faster than this is if I just do another SDF union and use a fresh paint SDF volume afterwards and merge that in. And then now, whoops, oh, no, I have to tweak the settings of this again. I could copy this one that I have with the settings that I like, plug it in here. But then it's going to have copies of all those strokes that I already made. But if I go to the stroke tab over here, I can like delete all of those. I can hit clear, and now it's basically a new one with the same settings. So I'll drag these off here to make this character's hair. And cool, now I already got kind of like a decent shape for this character blocked out really simply. Does that make sense so far? So just basically covered the VDB from polygons to the SDF union and then the paint SDF volume, and then convert it from a VDB back to polygons after. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's going to be more cool stuff that we can do with that even later. But like, yeah, if I wanted to have a third eye, I could just add another transform here, merge that in, you know, scale it down, bring it up. And we will do this later because there's lots of kind of fun that we can have with the sort of proceduralness of this setup. So yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, you could, instead of using the mirror, you could just use another transform and copy an eye over and do the similar thing. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted the eyes to just be totally symmetrical, you could totally just like mirror the eye like that, and then yeah, not have this one here, and then you could transform this around. But then also the eyes are always going to be looking in opposite directions, so that's, you know, less desirable. I prefer like splitting them up.
Okay, yeah.
And then, oh, well, yeah, actually, if you wanted to split these up after the mirror, like in terms of like splitting up the controls for them, you could do this. You could select this one and you could type transform when you're in the viewport, and then you'll get a control that is set to only work over the points for this other eye. Or on the mirror, you'll see that there's this output group checkbox. And so if you do that, it will make a group for the mirrored eye that's called mirror. And then if you go into the transform node and you type in mirror, then it'll do the same thing that I was just doing. Although that's better because it's more procedural to be doing it with this mirror group. Since if I were to instead do it the way that I was just doing, where I select this and press enter, and it has these sort of, you know, primitives 4900 through 9799 selected. If I then went back to the beginning and I said, oh, I want more, you know, polygons on my initial eye, it's going to like screw up what it's selecting because the point counts all change and it gets all screwed up and stuff. So keeping things as procedural as possible is definitely really important. And I would definitely recommend going with, you know, things that you get here in Houdini with some of the nodes, like the output group, you know, mirror group, as opposed to the, you know, selecting manually a bunch of polygons and saying, I want those to be, you know, the thing I'm using. Okay, so the VDB SDF union just basically means it's going to combine those two VDBs together. So I want to combine these VDBs that I have here from the VDB for polygons with the paint SDF volume. And this is like kind of the cool part about working with VDB SDFs is it lets you do these sort of Boolean operations that aren't that great to do with polygons really easily. So basically, you know, I can give an example of like, let's say I have a sphere and I want to go to convert VDB and plug it in here. And oh wait, no, I want to do VDB from polygons, plug it in here. And then I have a box over here. And I want a VDB from polygons that as well. And I can do a VDB combine down here to merge those two together. And if I move that sphere around, I have to set the VDB combine also, like I was saying, to SDF union in here on the operation. Or again, I can press tab, SDF union, and merge those down here. And now if I do an SDF union, basically what that's doing is very simply just like combining these two voxels. So wherever there's voxels on one or the other, it's going to create voxels in this new, you know, volume. Conversely, I could do a SDF difference, which is going to say take, you know, the first thing and subtract the second thing out of it. So take A minus B, and then I have basically this chunk coming out of this cube, and I can move it around and see, cool, I have sort of like this, you know, difference operation happening here. And then conversely, I can also, instead of difference, I can do intersection. And what that's going to do is it's basically saying like, if it's inside of both of them, so, you know, if these voxels are inside A and B, then, you know, create that object there or whatever. So they're all just like sort of like Boolean operations or like true or false sort of operations that are saying like, you know, yes, I'm in, you know, this, or I'm in, you know, this and this, or I'm in, you know, this, but not this, that kind of thing. So yeah, some fun computer science lingo with the Boolean operation stuff. Or I think that's computer science lingo. I don't know if that's actually from something else other than computer science, but computer science people just like it. But yeah, does that make sense? So these tools are like just so great for making these sort of organic shapes. And there's a lot more operations we can do than just those Boolean operations. We can also do VDB smooth. So if I go down here, before the convert VDB node, I can then say, I want to like, you know, smooth this thing out. Or I can say VDB reshape SDF, and I can basically dilate the VDB or make it sort of like thicker, or I can do a VDB erode where I sort of make it thinner, right? And that will sort of kill it if it gets too small. Or I could, you know, dilate it and then VDB smooth it afterwards and get kind of a nice extra smooth guy over here. So that's kind of a nice, you know, way to go about this so far. But there's like a lot more, even more kind of clever ways you can go about stacking these operations. So one node that I've made for myself that I really like, that I've used a lot, and I stole this sort of from, if you look up an old Entagma tutorial, Entagma Boolean dent, they have this very old, 5 years old tutorial called Boolean denting VDB basics. And they didn't come up with this, they just sort of made a tutorial on it. But it's this really sort of clever way to stack operations to be able to dent sort of one, you know, SDF object with another. So where that's really useful for is something that I like to use for like making eye sockets. So I want to sort of like dent this hole in the head where these eyes are. So I'll show real quick to do that. I have made my own VDB dent. What's CR? What's it called? Yeah, CR VDB dent. Boom. And I can plug. And I know that you don't have this in Go, but I'll show how this works and how you can make it yourself in a second. So I can go to the CR VDB dent and I'll plug the thing that I want in here and then the thing that I want to dent it with in here. And so I'll take the eyes and I'll VDB from polygons on the eyes over here. And I got these guys, and I'll lower the voxel resolution again, or I'll raise the voxel resolution again so that they're nice and dense. And then I'll plug this into the second input in the VDB dent. So boom, now I have these sort of like eye sockets for the eyes, but they're not like super prominent right now. And I have some more controls on here for how to tweak these. So I'll turn this offset up, and now you'll see that that kind of creates this nice sort of like eye socket pocket thing around the, you know, character's eyes. And what's cool then also is now if I want to like move this eye around, I can sort of, you know, move that and it will sort of move like the socket around with the character's eye, which is like super sweet. I love this effect so much. And then also similarly, what can be really cool would be doing another VDB dent. And I've actually set this up so that the third input can take just like a polygon instead of taking a VDB, so you don't have to convert it. It will instead convert it itself inside there. And so I can take like a sphere down here, plug this into the third input, and then I can say, you know, I want to make like the mouth shape with this, right? So I will sort of like put something in here that will sort of like chew out the mouth from the character. And you can sort of see how this is using like the VDB subtract operation. And I can, you know, offset that and make it, give it some sort of lips. And now we have this really fun, kind of quirky, simple character that would have been a lot trickier to model with just like box modeling or something and some other piece of software. And I can then, you know, animate it this way too if I want, in theory. Like, you know, you don't have to, you know, necessarily make like a super optimized polygonal mesh that you animate with joints and things like that. Like you can, if you want to animate with stuff this way, you know, and just like keyframe the mouth moving like that, you can totally, there's no reason you can't do that in Houdini. So yeah, pretty fun stuff. So now let's dive into the VDB dent, and I'll sort of show you all how this is working. So if I double click here in the VDB dent, the way that this is working is it's basically just taking these three inputs, right? Or it's taking either the first input and then either the second, which is the VDB, or the third input, which is the, you know, if you wanted to choose a regular polygon thing in there, polymesh. If you dive in here, double click on there, you'll see what's in here is a VDB combine node. So it's combining, you know, the first and the second input here. And I'll right click on here and I'll say allow editing of content so that I can mess with it now myself if I want. So VDB combine, and it's doing this intersection operation, right? So it's taking this base mesh, and then it's taking this mesh that it's subtracting out of the base mesh with, right? And it's saying like, whatever it's intersecting here, you know, leave that, right? So cool. And then it's dilating that up. That was sort of the offset that I was playing with, right? To make those like, those sort of like eyelids around the eyes, or like the lips on the character's mouth. So it's intersecting, then dilating, and then it's subtracting that, you know, second thing out of here again. So you can sort of see how this is making that like dent thing. And then it's smoothing it, and then it's merging that back with the original. And then it's one more time subtracting out that original thing. So it's just sort of a series of operations that you can stack together between, you know, object A and object B to create that like denting effect. So real quick, let's just do it again from scratch over here for people to be able to follow along and sort of make their own HDA. And so I'll take sphere, and I'll take a box up here, and I will be from polygons at both of them. So we have this so we can work with, right? And then I will put a null under this one, and I'll call this A, and I'll take the second one and I'll call it, whoops, I'll call it B, and I'll save also so that I don't crash again, which I did yesterday when I was running through this. And so we have A, and we want to dent it with B, right? So first thing I'm going to do a VDB SDF intersect, drop that down, A intersect with B. Then I'll do a VDB reshape, and that will dilate up our thing here. And then I'll VDB subtract. So again, I'm taking A and I'm subtracting B out of it. And then I'll do a VDB union again. So I will union the original A with this, right? And this will probably work better and be more clear if I drop the voxel size down of all this stuff. And the reshape, I'll dilate out a lot more so we can kind of see where that dent is happening better. And then, or actually maybe I'll use a sphere instead. That might look nicer. And I'll also subdivide this a bunch more. So change it from a primitive sphere to a polysphere, and same over here, change this from a primitive sphere to a polysphere. And so cool. We have the first chunk of this dent happening. And then the last thing that we really need is to subtract B out of it again. So VDB subtract, we'll take A, and then subtract B. And then cool, now we have this little denter. But this is a whole lot of nodes, and we maybe don't want to have, you know, this whole chunk of nodes like in here every time we want to make one of these dents in our character, like in this, you know, node network that's already getting kind of complex. So to make the HDA out of it, I'll just basically select this whole thing down here, the denter, and I will click on this subnet icon right here, the little box, and go boom. And now I have my VDB dent HDA. And you can go in here if you want to like tweak stuff specifically and you know, make edits on it. Or we can kind of promote all the controls from those nodes up here, like I did in the HDA. So I'll do that really quick. And Houdini makes this super easy. And part of the reason that Houdini is awesome is because it lets you make HDAs like this and, you know, your own tools and share them with people. So I'll click here. I'll say edit parameter interface. I'll select these 4 things that I don't want, and I'll make them invisible. And then I can dive into the subnetwork here, and I can go through each node one by one and choose what of these things do I want to have as options that are exposed, you know, at the top level when I'm making edits on this node. So definitely I want this offset here. So I'll drag that down here. And then I think that's actually sort of it. I think also what would be nice though would be if we have a VDB smooth SDF down here. So we have sort of smoothing controls. And I'll bring those back out here as well. And then I'll hit apply. And then now if we go up here, whoops, these should be made invisible. Why are these still visible up here? Well, anyway, now we have all those controls sort of like promoted to the top level. So we don't need to, you know, dive back in here to make edits to our denting setup. I'm going to go back to the edit parameter interface, and I'm going to check these again. Yeah, I'm going to check invisible, apply. Okay, now they're gone. I don't know why that didn't work the first time. But yeah, cool. Now we've made our own little HDA here, this handy little tool. And you could also right click and say, create digital asset, which is how you'd make an HDA out of it. And then that would save to that OTLs folder, I believe, and you can share it, you know, with your friends. So yeah, nice gift for your parents for their birthdays. Get them a nice little HDA that you made to make a VDB Boolean denting. I love that. So anyway, back to our little guy that we're making here. Now this stuff is all cool, and I love this sort of mouth that we have. But there's a few more kind of tricks that I want to show. And one of them is like another way that you can go about kind of creating geometry on these characters that's sort of fun. And a method that I like to use is if you want, you can draw curves on this convert VDB node. And if I get the draw curves off down here, and I go to the projection tab and I switch it from XY plane to geometry, and I'm gonna hide my reference guy now. I can just sort of like start drawing on this character, right? And I can make a little mouth, and I can give little teeth, and just do a fun sort of like 2D mouth drawing, right? And then you could kind of combine that back into here, but it's not made of polygons, so it's not going to render at all. But there's a couple of ways we could convert this into polygons if we wanted. So I could do a polywire SOP here. Whoops. And I'll lower the wire radius a bunch, and I'll color it in black. And then I can go back on here and I can draw more curves on here if we want. I'm going to simplify this mouth a little bit, and I'm just going to make it like a little smiley like that. But even better than the polywire, we can go back to our good old VDBs that we were using before. So one of the HDAs that I provided is this VDB from curves HDA. So you can convert curves into VDBs, and you have some handy little tools on here that I've made for like, I think I have to put a resample in here for this to work well. I think I have it built in here. Yeah, I need to expose that control on there. My bad. But I've built sort of some handy tools for like reshaping the curve along the length of it. So like if I want, I can make it so that the curve is sort of thinner at the sides and thicker over there. And I can just sort of draw live with this, and we can see, you know, these sort of worms kind of crawl over this character. We could do all kinds of like, you know, I'll show in a second, like kind of how I would go about animating these. But again, for right now, I want to keep it pretty simple and just sort of add a mouth on this character this way, like almost like a claymation style mouth or whatever, where it's just like a little bit of like clay stuck on the face.